All right, so I'm talking about storytelling because, as you all know, I have Mavens of Manufacturing. But one of my superpowers is to get people to open up to me and share their stories with me so that I can share them with the rest of the world. So I'm going to be talking about trust within storytelling and why that's important. So with industrial manufacturing, a lot of companies get a bad rep because it's been command and demand for so long that, there's some companies that treat their employees not particularly the best. And I think that's left some scars on some people's hearts. And then, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was in high school, I just remember when manufacturing took a hit and it left a lot of bad taste in people's mouths. So we have this skills gap or awareness issue or training issue, however you want to label it. There's a lot of people that aren't really coming into this sector and wanting to join us and work. So we're all here with the same mission. We want to advocate for engineering and manufacturing, and we have to do that through the content that we're creating. So the question is, what gets people to trust the people that they're following or listening to? And there's quite a few things that you can do to gain people's trust. And one of them is you have to really listen intently to them. And what I mean by that is not just with your ears, but with your eyes as well, and only speak when they're ready to speak with you. So trust involves a lot of consistency. Jake mentioned that a lot yesterday. Authenticity and transparency. And there's a few things that you can do for each of those things, and that's kind of what I want to touch on. And yes, I read from my notes. So, this is the authentic me. So authenticity is about really being genuine and truthful. You don't want to pretend to be something that you're not, because especially with Gen Z, they will call you out on your bullshit. Like, they will not be afraid to say, no, that's not who you are. Like, I don't trust your brand now. I don't want to follow any brand that I don't trust. And I think Jacob brought up a really good point yesterday with his phone. They do have a bad reputation as being stuck to their phone all the time. I used to say it to my daughter, like, you need to stop looking on your phone and stop going on Instagram and taking all these damn selfies. Like, what are you doing? What I wasn't seeing is that she was actually researching her own topics. And some of the things that she was researching were the social issues that really mattered to her. And depending on what she was researching, she would read the reviews or she would get information from a second resource. And it was through that journey of hers that she would buy from brands that she trusted. So any brand that doesn't come across as authentic, she didn't want anything to do with. So you really need to be true to who you are. And in terms of consistency, be consistent with that authenticity. So if you start switching up your story, like going from one thing to the next, people are going to start questioning what your intentions are, and they're not going to want to listen to your story anymore. You can't really contradict yourself, because if you do that, then a lot of people are going to be like, well, you're not really authentic. You're just kind of following the crowd. You're not true to who you are. So I'm not going to listen to your story anymore. The other thing that's really important is just transparency. So just be honest with who you are. When I first started this journey, I got a lot of great advice from people. Some of it was not wanted, of course, but there was advice given to me on who I should be or how I should be versus who I shouldn't be or how I shouldn't be. And I'm the type of person that if I pretend to be something I'm not, I get really nervous, and then I start to stumble over my words, and I don't really act like myself, and that can really screw up who I am as a brand. In terms of manufacturing companies, I feel like some of them are still struggling with being transparent about who they are. So when it comes to like their marketing materials, they're so afraid about not being perfect to who their audience is that that's when they start hiring actors, or they start hiring booth bunnies, or they start, marketing a certain way because they think that's what people want. Like, they see it working for another company, so they're like, oh, well, since it's working for them, then that's how I need to be. When in reality, it comes across as fake, and people are going to pick up on that. So you really have to be transparent about what your core values are and stick to that, and just know that we're all human. So it's okay to have the ahs and the ums. It's okay to fumble over your words. Example all the time on Mavens is I get a lot of women who are so afraid to like be vulnerable that they don't want to do the live event. And sometimes I have to go the extra mile to talk them into that, because it's that transparency, that authenticity of theirs that really draw people in, and they want to know more. So when you just act yourself, it's like any kind of other conversation. When you just act yourself and you stumble over and you say things by mistake, people like that. Like blooper reels, everybody's a fan of blooper reels. Why? Because it shows how people are, and they're funny. So everybody gets to laugh at your own expense sometimes. The other important thing is empathy. So my favorite stories that I hear from people in engineering and manufacturing are their struggles. And it's that struggle that keeps them going. But the other thing is, I try to put myself in their shoes, because I feel like if you have that empathy for people, they'll open up a little bit more, and it's easier for you to have that conversation with them. So just to be able to like connect with your audience on an emotional level, and that's something I think James is going to touch on, it's really important. Like if you don't have that human emotional connection with your audience, they're not going to care what you're talking about or who you are. A lot of manufacturers are so matter of fact and like, no, this is what we do, and we're not going to do it this way because we've been doing this, for so long. That's going to kill how people view them and like interacting with them. So when I work with companies, I try to ask them questions like, and this was the whole intent for yesterday's exercise. I wanted people to get comfortable about talking about themselves on a personal level, because that's truly what makes the emotional connections work. And some companies are just so focused on their products and processes that they forget what they like to do outside of work. They forget why they even came into this sector. And when we lose that emotional connection to what we're doing, that's when we really start hating our jobs. So I really like following the companies with the leaders. Like James, you're a good example of a great leader, in my opinion. He, like yesterday, he was talking about how, if you're missing your kid's recital, you're going to hear it from me. So that right there is something that I gravitate towards, because I'm a mom. So if you can have that common denominator with your audience, where you have something in common with them and you're pulling it into them, that's what gets people to want to work for you and want to like see your company succeed. So I think we're at an exciting time with the industry, because we're starting to see more of that shift where it's not so command and demand, but it's more like, you know what, we're providing value to people. People have their own lives outside of work. So how can we pull them in and really get them excited about what we're doing? And that's one of the things about Gen Z. They want people to believe in them. And you said that yesterday, and I was super excited when you said that, because if they don't see people believing in them, they're not going to come to you and want to work for you. And I feel like that's where we have a disconnect with manufacturers. We're not actually having conversations with your generation. We're just talking about the issues. We're not coming to you and saying, hey, what do you like? What is important to you? What are you passionate about? What do you want to know more about engineering and manufacturing? So I'm trying to like get companies comfortable with themselves, so that when they do come to me and say, hey, how do we get more women into this sector? How do we get more Gen Z excited about this? One of my first questions is, well, what are you doing to talk to them? Where are you going to meet them? Are you on social media? Are you going to the high school career fairs? Like, what questions are you asking them? Well, I'm not doing any of that. Well, then you're not going to have them come in and talk to you. So I'm trying to get companies to not just talk about their products and services, but also talk about why they are a company and what got them started, and sharing that story not just on their website, but also at trade shows. So when I funded that bus to come to IMTS, that was like one of the goals that I had for that. I wanted these kids to come in and talk to the actual manufacturers and hear their stories, because that's what's going to get them to gravitate towards this sector. So that's why trust is really important in storytelling, and we just need to be our authentic selves. If we make mistakes, don't be ashamed of those mistakes. Laugh it off, enjoy it, because I feel like your generation is going to appreciate that a lot more than how we were used to doing it. And you said that a lot too, like we're only hearing one side of the story most of the time. We're not hearing the whole story. So if we can start speaking the whole story and being a little vulnerable about where our shortcomings are, especially like, yeah, a lot of companies in manufacturing, they're not very green. Well, let's talk about that. Show why you're not very green, and in like any process that you're doing to be better. Like where are your shortcomings? How are you being better? And I think that will get people to really gravitate more towards the sector.